Present.
Going out of order today. Lisa Hadeen.
Present.
Scott Gergen.
I'm here.
There you go.
Yes. I love it.
Stephanie Malm here, and Kelsey Waits.
Here. All right. So it is not on our agenda, but we did approve it at the last meeting to do the pledge. So if we want to. Okay, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the regular board meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, so tonight's discussion is centered around budget adjustments.
And before we do that, I want to make a note, Scott Gergen was not at our last meeting, and I would just like to take a moment to acknowledge you, Scott, and the work that you've given to the board and to the district over the many years that you've served on the board, and officially thank you for all of that time, energy, and effort you've put in, because we were able to acknowledge the other outgoing board members at the last meeting. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It truly has been my pleasure. So I've learned a ton. I've worked with some awesome people, those in the room included, those that are no longer on the board. Learned a ton. And hopefully we're leaving the district in a better spot than it was 8 years ago. So thank you, though. I really appreciate it. The work was valuable. I liked giving back. Thank you.
And if any other board members would like to say something, please feel free to do so. I would like to just thank you for the last 4 years that we've been able to work together, and it's been great to just work as a team with you, and I appreciate everything you've given back to the district.
Thank you so much for the last, well, unfortunately only getting to work with you for 2 years. I wish it had been longer, because you're such an asset to the team. And I mean, you taught me about like contract negotiations, and that's like, I understand legal negotiations when it comes to like the actual contracts with that, but to do it with people and as a team, and that was a huge eye opener. And I really appreciate your mentorship and your technical and financial expertise. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Scott. I mean, the 4 years that you and I have served together have been, I think, very good for the district. I think we've done good work, and I appreciate your time and your effort. And thank you. And you and I and Kelsey will enjoy some free time.
Scott, you are so knowledgeable on so many things. The health insurance, the financials. There's few questions that you ask, and I'm like, I don't even know if I would have ever thought to ask that question. You are very insightful on this district, and thank you for the last 2 years.
Scott, I want to thank you for just like everybody said, your knowledge base. But I wanted you to know, because I didn't get to tell you last week, what jumps out at me the most, and I don't think you even realize how important this was to me, is when we had that COVID year, and we had to bring the 7th and 8th grade middle school football team in to play flag football. And we spent those Saturday mornings just talking about life in general. I mean, it wasn't necessarily board stuff. We talked about life. That meant a lot. And I got to learn a lot about you and got to learn to know you at a whole different level. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Scott, I don't even know where to begin. I really don't know where to begin. The 8 years that we've been able to serve, it is immeasurable, the degree to which the district has benefited from your service. Immeasurable. Moving to the to the self-insurance on healthcare and doing the contract negotiations, fine, all those technical points. But to see you take your family's history and turn it into service here, and to see that represented every day, and then the way you've just so thoughtfully engaged in really challenging times. Your personal integrity is just without question in my mind. Your willingness to do the hard work is unmatched, and I appreciate that so much. So thank you.
Yeah, I just really appreciate it. And like I said, I very much enjoyed giving back to the community. And there's lots of ways to give. There's lots of opportunities out there. So this is merely one of them. It was important work. It was work as a team at all times. And I really appreciated that. I appreciated being able to pull back the curtain a little bit and learn a lot more about our educational system. One of my older sisters is a principal in a metro school. My grandfather actually served as a board member in Farmington for about a decade. So it's interesting work. So thank you so much for letting me work with you. I appreciate it.
All right, so the topic for tonight is continuation of our budget adjustments. And so what I've put together, obviously, again, going back to our guiding change document that's been on all of these and what we're trying to accomplish, and then tried to synthesize where we are as of last week. So again, this will be no new news to people that have been following along, but on the left-hand side there, as of last week, we're maintaining that we need to find 1.3 million in adjustments. That would be 1.6 million if we add in the technology set aside that the board has been discussing. To this point, we're looking at using fund balance dollars to the tune of 650,000, regaining some revenue in middle school athletics, right sizing, and then we were looking at most recently secondary programming between 78,000 and 250,000. We've also considered the 172,000 out of the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 dollars. So those all total maximum over the amount that we would be looking for. And then on the right-hand side, the addition of that $300,000. So a couple things based off of last week's discussion. Just in a little bit more detail, I've highlighted both the yearbook and I've highlighted a section in the athletic participation fees just to point out that in discussions last week after the board meeting, working with the high school administration, the conversation was about folding yearbook into another class. And as we went through that in detail, while we can fold it into another class and potentially find a different and creative way to do it, we don't have a confidence that that's going to save us 0.2 FTE. So it probably makes sense to try and find how do we do something different with yearbook. I don't have confidence that that's going to get us any dollar gain. So that's why that one's highlighted. The athletic participation fees, I just want to point out that we're making the assumption that we would raise the fees by the 50% rate in order to get closer to that $50,000 mark. The rest of the items on the screen are the items that we left with after the discussion last week with regard to what we'd be looking at as the options for reductions, as well as at the bottom there, the introduction of a $300,000 set aside for the technology sustainment plan. So really where that leaves us then is this revised adjustment option sheet. So we're looking at right-sizing adjustments. We're looking at middle school athletics and activities. We're looking at secondary programming, which gets us to that $571,100. And then we add in ESSER dollars and the use of the fund balance, which brings in another $822,000 to the mix, which at the total on the bottom, you can see we're looking at just over the 1.3 million goal by about $93,000. And so that's where I'll leave it tonight. That's kind of the summary from last week and where the board had given some direction, and turn it over to the chair.
Stephanie?
Can we start discussion?
Yeah, no, yes, we can start discussion.
I'm going to say what I mean and mean what I say, so I'm just going to get straight to the point. I am not comfortable with the FIAD cut. And I after thinking about it further, I would say, you know, we talked about music, and I understand the complexities that come with the lessons and eliminating, or not eliminating the lessons, but adding fees to that, right? But with FIAD too, my personal opinion is that it's more detrimental to cut it right now, knowing that it will be cut at least next year. If it's not right now, it will be next year, but maybe we need to consider giving them that extra year to really hone in and focus on what are we doing with these kids? What are we doing with these classes? What does this really look like? Because I don't want these kids in study hall. I would rather them be physically engaged or sitting in a classroom learning about health and nutrition and mental health is a huge one too. I personally am not comfortable with that being taken off right now. And I apologize, I did not express that very well last week. I wasn't feeling the greatest, and so my brain was a little foggy. But I just want to open up the conversation. If we can discuss it further, change my mind. But that's where I'm at right now.
Becky?
Steph took the words right out of my mouth. I am not comfortable with taking away physical education at this time. We are in the process of doing program reviews. We haven't looked, we talked about music and then we just took it off the table. We just all of a sudden said, okay, let's do PE. I think we owe it. I know we're going to be in budget cuts next year. I just don't think it's fair at this time that we just take PE off at this time without doing these secondary reviews and waiting for all this programming to come back. Next year, they can maybe say, yeah, it's okay to take away 0.5. Music can say, you know what, we can do this, or we can look into charging for these extra lessons that these kids are taking instead of being in their math classes or their other classes. I think it's too detrimental to the kids' mental health, their physical education. I don't want them sitting in the study hall as well. I'm just not okay with it at this time either.
Lisa?
So I'm not okay with any of it, but that's where we are, right? And we're already basically kicking $835,000 down the road. And that's going to be cuts that we have to make next year, plus any additional cuts. And I want to be clear, I would have loved to see a little more creativity in program choices that were provided to us, but we didn't. And we are not saying you will not be able to take FIAD. We are not eliminating FIAD. We are saying our district has a standard that is a year above the state standard, and having that as a graduation requirement forces children and students in 10th grade, and actually even in 10th grade fall semester, to have to take a FIAD class, which causes all sorts of ripple effects to any number of the students in our building. And what we're saying is we're not going to mandate for graduation that you take FIAD. You may still enroll in FIAD. Or you could be in AVID, or you can be in global language, or you could be in 2 musics. And right now that's a pinch point. And so I'm not saying, oh yeah, we should eliminate it. I'm saying we come down to get closer to the state standard, leave programming choices available, acknowledging that that's probably, it's not probably, especially this insufficient. Because we are cross-subsidizing at over $800,000 just to get through it. And saying, no, really what we should do is get closer to $1 million. And we've already got 300,000 coming to technology. It's just, I see it as irresponsible to not make the difficult choice. It's not taking away program choice to a student, it's taking away a graduation requirement.
If we take away an FTE, these class sizes could double. And if these kids want to take an elective, are they going to be able to take that elective, is my question. If we have one less Phy-Ed or health teacher, is that elective going to be open, and what are their class sizes going to be? Are they going to be forced to be sitting in the study hall because they're not going to get that chance to have this because we're down a PE teacher?
So just to clarify, removing an FTE will not double class sizes. It will remove an option for a kid to take. However, as pointed out, if it is one of the required classes, then it doesn't mean that the class isn't there. It just means that not all kids will have to take it. The other piece is it is not a guarantee that kids that aren't in this class will go into a study hall, because they'll have to choose. Do they take another class that may not, or may be their first choice? So that's just to answer your question.
So I've been thinking about this a lot the past few days, and thinking specifically about physical education and mental health, and what that physical activity can do, and thinking about how for many kids, yes, physical education is a way to help their mental health. For other kids, having a forced requirement on them during a specific semester is taking away their choice and causing different issues with their mental health. And so for those kids who find mental health support through physical activity, they are still able to sign up for physical education classes and have that additional component. And for those kids who maybe have tremendous amounts of anxiety due to their body image or due to any other number of factors where PE actually makes them incredibly uncomfortable, they're not now forced to go in there. So while, yes, I think physical activity helps mental health, I also think there are other things that help mental health. Like maybe by not taking it, that student can take a second music class, and music is where they thrive and feel comfortable. And so, as Lisa pointed out, it's not getting rid of a program option. It's getting rid of the requirement that you have to be in that program in that semester, which is actually a very binding for scheduling options. Stephanie?
No, I was just going to say thank you for that perspective. That isn't something that I necessarily considered, so I really appreciate that.
So I'd have to go back and watch the meeting, which doesn't sound fun, to get to the exact point. But my recollection of it is, and this is still my perspective on it, is the secondary program evaluation from 512 for music is pretty complicated. It's not pretty complicated, but it's more complicated. It's more tied up in the curricular class and the lesson support and staff that are serving multiple buildings. And it is with limited exception, elective. I couldn't remember that word last week. It's an elective. Phy-Ed is also an elective, and it exceeds the state standard. And it has been a place where we have seen additional costs. Additional costs were identified this year because of that mandatory 10th grade fall requirement. That had to be additionally subsidized with staff because all of the kids had to happen in that semester. And we saw those costs be brought forward. I know of my family has personally experienced the scheduling challenges, and I know of other families that have personally experienced the scheduling challenges, and we, in fact, as a district, have created a workaround to that scheduling challenge. So it's always, not always, it has for many years been a challenge for many families. Dual music, global language, avid families run into scheduling problems that time every year. So it was looking at a program that very likely, and I think this came out of the meeting last week, music will very likely have to reevaluate how they deliver their program but is a little more difficult to understand, at least for me, versus a program that we have already seen conflicts on and that we know creates problems for multiple families, and it exceeds the state standard. So when the weighing down of those two things came, that's where I felt like this conversation switched and said, all right, music, be ready. You're going through this, get at the table, start participating, because this is going to happen. And the FIAD is, this has been a problem for multiple years. The pinch point piece exceeding state standard, and it's not eliminating an alternative. And that's where I felt like the conversation switched. I might be misremembering it, but that was my takeaway on it.
That was really helpful, thank you. So then social studies, because that was another one that we took off the table. And from my understanding, it was because we identified it as something that is very important right now, that needs to stay on. But could that be put back on the table and then allow, very much like the PE, allow that additional elective?
I don't know the answer to the actual question, so I'm going to answer a different question. And it's still, to me, that social studies is an academic requirement. I would be open to considering what it may or may not do for FTE reduction if we change the graduation requirement. It still doesn't solve the 10th grade fall semester pinch point for many, many, many families. So if it's a matter of, I would like to solve that problem as well going into this registration year, because we saw the impacts this year. Families have been experiencing it for multiple years, and I'm tired of not responding to it. So that it doesn't get at that solution. So whether that's unhinging it from 10th grade, unhinging it from fall semester, I just feel like we are on a trend towards we can provide state standard requirement of education and then electives, and each family makes the choices about what serves their students' needs the best. So I'd like to solve both of those things, which is also kind of what helps me with, again, not about eliminating, not saying, oh, hate FIAD, don't want a kid in FIAD, but saying we have created, we the board, the historic board, created an issue where we've exceeded state standards for graduation. And that is causing us problems, and it's causing us financial problems, and it's causing us access problems. So let's resolve that issue. And it gives us a couple solutions. A couple solutions fall out of it. That's why that's appealing to me, of the challenging choices on the table.
So maybe Rachel can nod her head here. So as I understand it, the 10th grade physical education credit, if that is removed, it will not alter the program's structure. Should social studies come back on the board as a reduction, would that alter that program structure? That may not be a question you can answer. Okay, so that is an unknown as far as trying to make a decision tonight.
Can you expand on what you mean by program structure? I'm not sure I'm understanding what that means in this context.
So, Mike?
I think the idea that was discussed is HP 10 is no longer a required class. There still would be elective classes for which students could choose. think the same thing would be for example, if we were to say in ninth grade for social studies, instead of some schools, instead of a year of civics, they'll have a semester of civics. So the course really, it's not like we'll have civics as an elective or HP 10 as an elective, but there are other courses within those departments for elective. Some may be available now, some may choose senior year social studies electives.
Brian, if I recall last week, you had talked about music lessons. Did you want to provide any insight into your thinking?
Sure. What happened with the music lessons, and I'm learning a little bit more about it now. Actually, I have a question for you, Mike. Hate to put you on the spot. So how often are the lessons part of pullouts from other classes? I'm sorry, I keep getting you up and down and apologize.
I think the lesson structure does come from other classes, or it can be during a study hall or before or after school. If there are sectionals, that's usually something that's done within that class unless there's a special group. But for the most part, lessons are pull out or before and after school.
Okay, so the kids pick before and after school, or it could end up being a pullout. That's actually helpful to know. And since I've got you here, so you don't have to get up again, is it true that there are 4 additional Phi Ed options? Are there 4 Phi Ed classes that are not what we're talking about here? Like there's a lift, there's something that has to do with competitive teams. Is that true? There's 4 of them?
There's fit, different levels of fit, 1, 2, 3, 4. Spark, speed, power, acceleration, reaction, and quickness. There's lift of different levels. And this last year, we did not offer competitive and lifetime sports because we had to make some tough choices.
Okay, thank you. So getting back to the lessons piece, what I had said at the time was, if you pick choral, pick band, it doesn't matter. Conceptually, I can't wrap my head around how you have a band or choral without actually, having a lesson. Now, if those lessons need to be tweaked in such a way that they are before or after school, so they're not pulled out of academics, which is something I guess I wasn't fully versed in. I'll be honest, I don't like the idea of anything being pulled out of another academic thing, but I think that's part of programmatic review, that we figure out the things that we don't want to do anymore. We would prefer for it not to be pulled out of class. It needs to be before or after school. Kids are going to have to figure that out, whatever it happens to be. But it had to do with the fact that you can't, what's the point of being in band or choir if you never practice or never take a lesson? What would be the point of playing hockey if you never practiced? So that's what I think that came down to. I will say this, and I completely get you on the financial part. I get it. At this point, with where we sit, it's almost like I want to just have all this stuff get programmatically reviewed, including Phi Ed, and I know it creates even more financial burden, but I think it's with the understanding that next year, when we make these tough decisions, the reality is they're going to be brutally tougher. And because, I'll just say this now, regardless of what we do, every department in every building needs to be on alert that no one is going to be spared next year. I mean, I'm being honest. I can't imagine how anybody gets spared next year. So the programmatic review, hopefully, will get us to where some of those decisions have been made over the course of the year over a structured process, so that we're not sitting back here having to cut what'll probably be, who knows, $2.5 million for who knows? It could be any number, but it's going to be larger than this one. I can tell you that. But I'm willing to say, okay, if Phi Ed's the one we're talking about here, and we want to roll it up into the programmatic review, and we have to take that on, I'm willing to do it for a year, with the understanding that next year is going to be a really, really, really brutal year, far more brutal than this one even.
I'm not prepared to support that. I'm not prepared to support kicking this down the road. And I've acknowledged, and I recognize that the kids' lessons, students' lessons, that they're pullouts. And what that is instead of saying we're going to offer or require 8 lessons and we're going to give you a chance to try out for all state band and come in and practice your ensemble, you can't do it anymore. There's no space. So it's not about the lesson being before or after school. It's about not having a staff member to schedule a lesson, right? You don't have, that person doesn't exist. So just to be clear on that side, that's my understanding there. This is such a big number already that we are choosing not to deal with, because if that's what we go forward with, we've already accepted multiple times that right sizing number, we might not get there, right? And we accept that that's probably the highest number we will get. Like if all things go as projected, that's the highest number we're going to get on right sizing. And maybe we're really only going to get 300 out of that, because we'll get a handful of students and our class sizes will get slightly larger in fourth grade, and we'll change it. And it'll be the right choice. We're not going to gain enough students to make that money back, but we're going to lose it. And we've gone slightly under on our middle school athletics. And now we're considering taking secondary programming off the table. And we've put ESSER money on the table. And we've got $300,000 that's going into our tech subsidy, sustainability, excuse me. It is not responsible to not choose. It's just not. And it's not responsible to say, yeah, we're prepared to make a tougher choice, because I don't think we are. We're not even prepared to make a tough choice now. And that's really, really disappointing to me.
Scott and Dave, we haven't heard from either of you yet.
Well, I'll go to the point about the music versus the PE program. We sent 4 girls through the school system, and they all were quite upset that, they couldn't fit in, because having to have that Phi-Ed class was a problem. And and they were all part of the music program, but that's just our personal experience, and they didn't, But to get to the bigger discussion here, 1,000,003, whatever it says there, without my glasses on, I'm afraid that, that's, like Lisa said, in the right sizing category. If we get over 300,000 and not that 571 there, we'll be in worse shape. And, you don't want to sit there and kick the can down the road, because the road is going to get bumpier and it's going to get hillier. And, it's like, okay, right now we got a finger that's bleeding. Next year we'll have a wrist that'll be gone. And what happens when it's a shoulder? We have to be able to balance the books, even as hard as it is. We've gone through 6 meetings, I think, already. And, we've come to this point, and it has to be done. And like I said, the 1,000,003, 930 or whatever it says there, I'm a fear that we won't make that, even if we say we're going to accept this budget adjustment right now.
Can we go back one page, please? Okay. So on the athletic and participation fees, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is that we will never turn away an athlete who wants to participate because they can't pay the fee. Is that true?
That's correct. We have currently we have about 90% of our students that are able to pay their fees.
Right. On the activity fees, we've never charged an activity fee, yet we are paying stipends to our school leaders that are leading those efforts, correct? Again, with the activity fees for a club, is it true that we will never turn away a student that wants to participate in one of these clubs that financially they cannot?
We'd run the same program.
Okay. If we can go back back forward one page, please. So again, with the right sizing adjustments, we've talked about those already, the 444, 600. We acknowledge that is our best guess right now, and that is subject to change next year. It's not going to change by 50%, but it could change by a partial FTE or 1 FTE, which would put a dent in that to the not meeting the adjustment goal. The middle school athletics and activities with the 50% increase and the activities now getting a $50 charge, we've looked at that. We've looked at their surrounding districts. We've looked at districts in our conference. We know that we're kind of the odd ones that we're not charging for this. Now, we're not absolutely alone. I know that, but we have a budget deficit. The secondary programming change for physical education. Again, we are above the state standard. When I compare that to would I rather have a full year of civics, or would I rather have 2 full years of health and human performance? Because we're not talking about health. Health is going to remain. We're talking about human performance in 10th grade. So would I rather? When I have gone through it, I land on I would rather have the civics. The secondary programming for PE, this is not saying that we do not value it. That is not our statement whatsoever. We are in a tough position. The position we've been in multiple times as a board. This is never easy. You know, the past cuts weren't easy either. I mean, on the plus side, our budget could change as well. We have unfilled positions. As we continue to have unfilled positions, well, we're not spending that money in our current year. So that could help us down the road, but I don't want to count on that. We're actively trying, in the consent agenda coming up, we're actively trying and incentivizing filling those positions. So that is not a strategy that I want to depend on. So when you look at the ESSER dollars, okay, in our guiding principles, we said we don't want to use one-time money to do this. And here we are, using one-time money to do this. The fund balance is healthy, but we all know, we've all seen the projections, we've all seen the 5-year, how quickly it can go. If you do nothing or you don't do enough, we know how quickly we can hit that $8 million number. And to be clear, the $8 million number that is recommended for us to maintain in our fund balance represents 2 months of operating expenses, and that is a recommendation, okay? This is not a hard and fast, we absolutely positively have to keep it in there. It works like a shock absorber. I would recommend that we follow the guidance of our financial experts and keep that amount in there. So with that, the decisions are hard. Nobody wants to give up anything. Nobody wants to cut music. No one wants to add fees. No one wants to cut FIED. No one wants to cut the media specialist. No one wants to lose an assistant principal. No one wants to lose staff due to right sizing, etc. But these are the choices in front of us right now. Kicking it down to next year. Now, again, I won't be here to make that hard choice next year, but we've all been, I've gone through it multiple times. Some of you have only done it once. It's hard and it's heart-wrenching to go through those. And having one potentially bigger than this, I've been around for 1.6 and 1.7 and those hurt. I can't imagine one bigger than that. I don't know what that would look like. So these aren't easy changes. We need that secondary programming review. We need that music programming review. Okay? This is not saying that music is untouchable. This is not saying that social studies is untouchable. Like Brian mentioned, next year, I would say that the district as a whole needs to be prepared that there may be some even tougher choices coming down the road. So with that, I am in favor of making the athletic fee increases and the activity increases. Again, I don't believe that, I don't know what we spend on the middle school athletics and middle school activities in terms of how much we spend on the staff that coordinates those for us. But bringing that in, making the change to Phi-Ed, we're not losing Spark. We're not losing, students who want to take the additional PE classes can do so. Students who want to go a different direction can do so. Students that want a study hall, which maybe for some, that would be an okay thing as well. I'm not a huge fan of study halls, but for some of our students, that might be an important part of their day. The ESSER dollars, we've talked about those already. Again, those are a one-time fund. I put those in the same bucket as dipping into the fund balance. That's one-time money. Once we spend it, it's gone. That's it. We have to replace it for next year. So the one-time fund usage total, that 822, that's what we're kicking down the road. We know we are over budget by that amount, by roughly $800,000. Now, given the adjustment total here is 1393, and we need 1.93 million. So roughly $800,000 is what we're kicking down the road. So I'm in favor of this as it stands. As of right now, that is my thinking. I've appreciated the conversation and I've listened very closely to each of you. This is where I've landed. I do want to again talk about how important it will be to have levy support down the road. If we do not, at an absolute bare minimum, renew our levy at its existing level in the fiscal year 24, I would recommend highly that we increase it. That requires voter approval. That requires the board being unified to go out after that levy. We have to have that. If we do not have that, this is going to look like nothing. So, thank you.
So I appreciate all of the conversation. When it comes down to it, as we look at that, we're already breaking our piggy bank. The only question is how much money are we pulling out of it? And the reality is the more we take out now is less that we have later. And should the levy not pass, should we not renew it, this is $78,000 less that we will have at that time. So I continue to go back to, no one wants to make these decisions, but as Lisa has said before, we ran to make the decisions. And throughout this conversation, we have continued to go back to the administration and said, do you have other creative options? Are there other adjustment possibilities for us? And we continue to be back here with this. And as a board, we have given our governance. We've said, this is what we're looking for from administration. This is the number we're trying to hit. And they have come back to us with the options that they have presented to us. They have done their role and we have done our role. And really, we've adjusted our role by now pulling in those ESSER dollars that we hadn't initially planned to pull in. No one wants to make this decision. I don't want to make this decision. But I continue to come back to, we are not removing an opportunity or an option. What we are doing is removing a requirement, and we are removing that pinch point. And for those students that physical education is incredibly important and helps their mental health, they are able to take that as an elective. That is not going away. They have that option to get the support that they need and to have that outlet for themselves. And as much as I don't want to make this decision, I am in support of what has been presented to us for the revised budget adjustment.
Thank you, Kelsey, and to Scott. You said it very well. I do want to say something just for the general public too, that this is, well, for me, round 3 for budget adjustments, because we did 2 last year and then we have this one. Prior to, and correct me if I'm wrong, prior to me and Brian and Becky coming on the board, administration was looked at and slashed. So just to clarify, that has already been, they are bare bones right now. Like thank you, Jen, for everything you do. They are bare bones. So I just wanted to make that clear that this is where we're at right now.
Yep. And just to be clear, when you talk about administration, we're not talking about we are not singularly speaking of our administrators of our buildings. So our principals, our assistant principals. We are talking about principals, assistant principals, support staff, district staff, media specialists, all of our admin assistants, everything across the board. So yes, those have been reviewed. Those have been cut in the past. And again, Bob, you come from a different district, and I know that you have mentioned this in the past about coming to Hastings and looking at it, and we run really lean in those areas. Would you agree?
So the declining enrollment and needing the adjustments is not new. We've seen the declining enrollment for a long time. And so naturally the first things that were cut from our budget, or just as people have retired and we've chosen not to renew those positions even, that we do run a much leaner district when we look at support staff and administrative staff than other districts of comparable size. And we have shrunk as much as we can on that front. And so finding savings from that perspective is just not an option at this point.
Well, and I will point out, we did have one of those types of positions on the first go around a couple weeks ago, and chose not to advance with a counseling staff person in the reduction. I will say this weekend I was approached by somebody saying, how come music is always first? And I, not super calmly, replied that I get it. If this is the intersection with your personal life and your personal experience with the district, it feels like it's first. But this has been 10 years, and we've closed elementary schools, and we've given up lease space, and we've modified our middle school schedule, and we've put 5th graders in middle school, and we've reduced our support staff, and we've consolidated positions. And to this point, I mean, I still come back to supporting the revised budget as it's stated now, because that pinch point of too many requirements in 10th grade is causing conflict, and it's causing costs that if we don't address them now, we will have to address them in the future. And it's been identified to us, and we need to be responsible and resolve it. But this is not the first year, and it's not the last year. It's hard to look at one year and say, how come? You have to look at the arc of the experience.
Are there any further comments from board members? Okay. Based on the discussion, I think we can move it forward as presented, and we'll find where the votes land. So we can move on to the consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
there any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Items for individual action is the budget adjustments.
You just want that slide up there?
Okay, so do we have a motion to approve the proposed 2022-2023 budget adjustments?
So moved.
Second.
Oh,
And is there any further discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Scott?
Superintendent McDowell, is there anything that we are missing as a board? Is there something, anything additional that we should be considering here? Is something we have missed?
I don't believe there's anything that's missed. I think it's always it's what we talk about. It's to whom at what cost and what the board's willing to take on, the difficult decision the board's willing to make at that time. We've asked our building principals to come up with options. We've asked them to come up with different options. We've gone round and round on the different things to do. We've shared that we believe that based on what we need to reduce due to a variety of reasons and the structures that we currently have in place at our secondary buildings have hit kind of a crossroads, which led to the conversation about the programmatic reviews. And so I think until we get that done, I don't know that there's much more that we could do. I think the fact that in 3 rounds of budget reductions, we've finally hit the spot where we have needed to present against the guiding change, the use of fund balance and ESSER dollars is an indication as to where we are.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments?
I just have one quick question for Superintendent McDowell. So the removal of the semester of Phi-Ed, will that, in terms of those number of students, right, in terms of schedule and things like that, will that create additional ripple effect onto everyone that's responsible for doing the scheduling, the administrative pieces, all that? Is that going to create an additional stress point there as well?
Anytime we make an adjustment to scheduling, staffing, or what's offered, always is going to change the level of difficulty and the challenges associated with finding spots for kids. So the answer is always going to be yes whenever we make an adjustment like that. It was hard to schedule kids this year. It'll be hard to schedule kids next year. There are places where it's going to cause conflicts that we're going to have to figure out some creative solutions to. But that's with any change to the schedule.
Anyone else? Okay, seeing no more discussion. All those in favor of approving the budget adjustment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, future meetings. The organizational meeting will be on January 5th, and that will be where the board officers are decided and new board members are seated. And then the first community engagement meeting of the year will be January 25th. Okay, is there any other business tonight? All right. Well, have a great night. Meeting is, do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Look at this.
So moved. Oh, did I do it? Did I ditch you again?
Thank you, Dave Pemble, for your 4 years of service. Thank you, Kelsey Waits, for your 4 years of service and your leadership. Both of you have done very good work. Thank you. It's important for our schools. It's important for our community. So I value it. And I will second Brian's motion to adjourn.
All right, meeting is adjourned.